Longitudinal, fore and aft, clearance of constant speed propeller blades or cuffs must be at least half an inch between propeller parts and stationary parts of the aircraft. This clearance is with the propeller blades feathered or in the most critical pitch configuration. Why is a constant speed counterweight propeller normally placed in full high pitch position before the engine is stopped? To prevent exposure and corrosion of the pitch changing mechanism. In the full high pitch position, the pitch changing mechanism is covered, which prevents corrosion. The thrust produced by a rotating propeller is a result of an area of decreased pressure immediately in front of the propeller blades. The airfoil of the propeller creates a low pressure area in front of the blade. Higher pressure on the face of the blade produces thrust in the forward direction. Propeller blade stations are measured from the hub center line. Blade stations on the propeller are measured from the center line of the propeller hub. What is the result of moving the throttle on a reciprocating engine when the propeller is in a constant speed range with the engine developing cruise power? Opening the throttle will cause an increase in blade angle. Since the propeller is in a constant speed range, it will maintain the same RPM by absorbing the increased throttle position by increasing the blade pitch. This will cause the manifold absolute pressure, MAP. The angle of attack of a rotating propeller made is measured between the blade chord or face and which of the following? Relative airstream. The angle of attack of any airfoil is between the chord of the airfoil and the relative wind. The propeller blade angle is defined as the acute angle between the airfoil section chord line at the blade reference station, and which of the following? The plane of rotation. Propeller blade angle is the angle between the blade's plane of rotation and the chord line at a certain blade station. Which of the following functions requires the use of a propeller blade station? Measuring blade angle. The blade angle must be referred to at a specific blade station because of the curvature of the blade. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a propeller that is in the high RPM position when reversing action has begun? Low pitch directly to reverse pitch. A propeller will move from low pitch, high RPM, to zero pitch, and into reverse pitch. Propellers move from feather to high to low to zero and on to reverse, and then back in the same order. For takeoff, a constant speed propeller is normally set in the low pitch, high RPM position. The low pitch, high RPM position is used to produce maximum available power. Counterweights on constant speed propellers are generally used to aid in increasing blade angle. Counterweights are used to move the blades to a high pitch or feather position. Inspection of propeller blades by dye-penetrant inspection is accomplished to detect cracks or other defects. Any surface crack should be detectable by dye-penetrant inspection on aluminum blades. During operational check of an aircraft using hydromatic full feathering propellers, the following observations are made. The feather button, after being pushed, remains depressed until the feather cycle is complete, then opens. When unfeathering, it is necessary to manually hold the button down until unfeathering is accomplished. Both feather cycle and unfeather cycles are functioning properly. This question describes the normal operation of a hydromatic full feathering propeller. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a feathering propeller that is in the high RPM position when the feathering action is begun? Low pitch through high pitch to feather position. The propeller will move from low pitch, high RPM, to high pitch to feather position. Propellers move from feather high, low, zero, and on to reverse, and then back in the same order. The low pitch stop on a constant speed propeller is usually set so that the engine will turn at its rated takeoff RPM at sea level when the throttle is open to allow takeoff manifold pressure. The low pitch stop will allow the engine to turn at the rated takeoff RPM when the throttle is open to the allowable takeoff manifold pressure. This sets the low pitch stop so the engine will have the correct load applied to it. Which of the following forces or combination of forces operates to move the blades of a constant speed counterweight type propeller to a high pitch position? Centrifugal force acting on the counterweights. Centrifugal force always acts on counterweights to move the blades to a higher pitch. What operational force tends to increase propeller blade angle? Aerodynamic twisting force. Aerodynamic twisting force tends to increase the blade angle. What is the primary purpose of the metal tipping which covers the blade tips and extends along the leading edge of wood propeller blades? To prevent impact damage to the tip and leading edge of the blade. The metal leading edge and tipping helps to prevent impact damage and erosion of the blade's leading edge and tip. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a full feathering, constant speed propeller that is in low RPM position when the feathering action has begun? High pitch directly to feather position. The low RPM position of the propeller is high pitch. The blade will move directly from high pitch to feather. Which of the following is identified as a cambered or curved side of a propeller blade, corresponding to the upper surface of a wing airfoil section? Blade back. The camber side of the blade is the back of the propeller blade. The purpose of permanently sealing and partially filling some models of Macaulay propeller hubs with dyed oil is to make the location of cracks readily apparent. The dye makes any cracks that occur in the hub easily to identify. What type of imbalance will cause a two-blade propeller to have a persistent tendency to come to rest in a horizontal position with the blades parallel to the ground while being checked on a propeller balancing beam? Vertical. One side of the hub is out of balance in the vertical plane. This is vertical imbalance. Grease used in aircraft propellers reduces the frictional resistance of moving parts and is easily molded into any form under pressure. This statement defines anti-friction and plasticity characteristics of grease. Anti-friction and plasticity deal with lubrication qualities and the ability to conform to the geometry of the inside of the propeller hub. Which of the following determines oil and grease specifications for lubrication of propellers? Propeller manufacturers. The propeller manufacturers list the approved grease in their manuals. The application of more protective coating on one blade than the other when refining a wood propeller may be necessary to achieve final balancing. Normally, the final balance is achieved by applying more finish to the light blade. Apparent engine roughness is often a result of propeller unbalance. The effect of an unbalanced propeller will usually be greater at high RPM. The unbalance will be greater at a high RPM setting because it is multiplied at higher speed. On most reciprocating multi-engine aircraft, automatic propeller synchronization is accomplished through the actuation of the propeller governors. The synchronization system receives speed signals from each propeller's governor. By adjusting the governor setting, the propeller speed is held constant. How is aircraft electrical power for propeller de-icer systems transferred from the engine to the propeller hub assembly? By slip rings and brushes. Slip rings, rotating, on the propeller contact fixed brushes attached to the engine. Electricity flows through the brushes and onto the slip rings. The slip rings are wired to the blade heating elements, which heat in sequence. A propeller synchrophasing system allows a pilot to reduce noise and vibration by adjusting the phase angle between the propellers on an aircraft's engine. Synchrophasing systems adjust the phase angle of the propellers. The phase angle is adjusted by changing the RPM on one of the propellers. This will change the phase angle to reduce noise and vibration. What action takes place when the cockpit control lever for a hydromatic constant speed propeller is actuated? Compression of the speeder spring is changed. The propeller control in the cockpit changes the tension of the speeder spring, thus it changes the engine's RPM. If a blade in a particular metal propeller is shortened because of damage to the tip, the remaining blades must be reduced to conform with the shortened blade. If a repair results in one blade being shortened, then all blades must be shortened. A balance problem would occur if the other blades were not shortened. During an on-speed condition of a propeller, the centrifugal force of a governor flyweights is equal to the speeder spring force. The on-speed condition occurs when the governor flyweights and the speeder spring are in equilibrium. When engine power is increased, the constant speed propeller tries to function so that it will maintain the RPM, increase the blade angle, and maintain a low angle of attack. The blade angle must increase to maintain constant RPM because the power increase. Manifold pressure would increase. During engine operation at speeds lower than those for which the constant speed propeller control can govern, in the increased RPM position, the propeller will remain in the full low pitch position. Since the propeller is not in the constant speed range, the blades will remain in a low pitch position. What actuates the pilot valve in a governor of the constant speed propeller? Governor flyweights. The governor flyweights move the pilot valve up or down to control the flow of engine oil to the propeller. If a flanged propeller shaft has dowel pins, the propeller can be installed in only one position. When the shaft has dowel pins, the propeller can only be installed in one position by aligning the dowel pins during installation. What controls the constant speed range of a constant speed propeller? The mechanical limits in the propeller pitch range. The mechanical limits control the pitch range with a high and a low pitch stop. If it is a feathering propeller, there is a feathering stop. Which of the following statements concerning the installation of a new fixed-pitch wood propeller is true? Inspect the bolts for tightness after the first flight and again after the first 25 hours of flying. It is important to check the bolts for tightness because of the different moisture content of the wood. It is important to check the bolts often. If propeller cones or hub cone seats show evidence of galling and wear, the most likely cause is the propeller retaining nut was not tight enough during previous operation. If the cones do not make complete contact, the retaining nut was not tight. This could also cause vibration during operation. On aircraft equipped with hydraulically operated constant speed propellers, all ignition and magneto checking is done with the propeller in what position? High RPM. The engine check should be made in a low pitch position, which is the high RPM position. This allows the engine to produce normal power. Oil leakage around the rear cone of a hydromatic propeller usually indicates a defective spider shaft oil seal. Oil leaking from the rear hub of a hydromatic propeller is normally coming from the seals leaking from the spider shaft oil seal. Maximum taper contact between crankshaft and propeller hub is determined by using bearing blue color transfer. The surfaces of the cones are covered with a color transfer material. Then the propeller is installed and tightened. Then the propeller is removed and the contact of the cones are noted. A minimum of 70% contact must be made. Propeller blade tracking is the process of determining the positions of the tips of the propeller blades relative to each other. Blade tracking is the process of determining if the blade tips are in the same plane of rotation. Any track tolerance is listed in the airframe manuals. What is the basic purpose of the 3 small holes, number 60 drill, in the tipping of wood propeller blades? to allow the moisture which may collect between the tipping and the wood to escape. Vent the tipping. These are vent holes and are used to remove any moisture that has collected in the tip of the blades. A fixed pitch wooden propeller that has been properly installed and the attachment bolts properly torqued exceeds the out-of-track allowance by a 1/16 of an inch. The excessive out-of-track condition may be corrected by placing shims between the inner flange and the propeller. A fixed pitch wood propeller can be shimmed within limits to correct the track of the blade. The primary purpose of the front and rear cones for propellers that are installed on spline shafts is to position the propeller hub on the spline shaft. The cones are tapered so as the propeller is tightened down on the spline shaft, they will center the propeller and seat its mating taper area on the propeller. This helps the propeller remain square to the spline shaft. After proper removal of aluminum blade damage, the affected air surface should be polished with very fine sandpaper. If the blade is aluminum, steel wool would cause corrosion. Very fine sandpaper should remove any scratches made during the repair. Which of the following generally renders an aluminum alloy propeller unrepairable? Transverse cracks of any size. Any types of cracks that have occurred across the blade is reason for rejection. This makes the blade unrepairable. The primary reason for careful inspection and prompt repairing of minor surface defects such as scratches, nicks, gouges on aluminum alloy propellers is to prevent fatigue failure. When a nick is placed in the leading edge of the blade, the stress is concentrated at the base of the nick. This can cause fatigue cracks to start at the bottom of the nick. The nick should be removed completely. Surface treatment to counter the effects of dye-penetrant inspection on a propeller is accomplished by washing off with solvent. Normally, the area inspected should be washed with solvent. If the penetrant is water-based, then water would be the appropriate wash. In either case, the area should be thoroughly washed. Manually feathering a hydromechanical propeller means to port governor oil pressure from the cylinder of the propeller. Porting the oil away from the propeller cylinder will allow the spring and flyweights to feather the propeller. When preparing a propeller blade for inspection, it should be cleaned with mild soap and water. The propeller should be cleaned of dirt with soap and water. Never use steel wool. MEK will remove the paint, and the blades need to be cleaned well enough to see any defects in the blades. In what position is the constant speed propeller control placed to check the magnetos? Full increase, low propeller blade pitch angle. To allow the engine to develop power, the propeller should be in full increase RPM, which is the low blade pitch angle. Minor surface damage located in a repairable area, but is not on the leading or trailing edges of aluminum blades, may be repaired by first filing with a riffle file. A riffle spoon file can remove a nick in the face of the blade. This type of damage should be blended from the center out. The bottom of the nick should be removed completely. Generally, unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer, repairs of nicks, scratches, gouges on aluminum propellers must be made parallel to the length of the blade. The filing and removal of the defect should be made with strokes that are parallel to the blade's leading edge. All repair file marks and scratches must be removed. It is important that nicks in aluminum alloy propeller blades be repaired as soon as possible in order to eliminate stress concentration points. When a nick is placed in the leading edge of the blade, the stress is concentrated at the base of the nick. This can cause fatigue cracks to start at the bottom of the nick. The nick should be removed completely and as soon as possible. Which of the following methods is used to straighten a bent aluminum propeller blade that is within repairable limits? Cold straightening only. Straightening of a propeller blade is done by cold straightening, which is normally only done in a propeller repair station. Repairs of aluminum alloy adjustable pitch propellers are not permitted to be made on which of the following propeller blade areas? The shank. Repair to the shank of the blade is not permitted. How is the oil pressure delivery on a hydromatic propeller normally stopped after the blades have reached their full feathered position? Electric cutout pressure switch. The feathering pump is activated to bring the propeller to feather. As the feather position is reached, the pressure builds to the pre-selected pressure and the cutout switch then stops the pump. The blades are held in feather by aerodynamic forces. What method would be used to inspect an aluminum propeller blade when a crack is suspected? Dye penetrant. Dye penetrant is used because the blade is aluminum. What operational force causes propeller blade tips to lag in the opposite direction of rotation? Torque bending force. As the propeller rotates, torque bending force tends to move the blades in a direction opposite of normal rotation. Which of the following statements about constant speed counterweight propellers is also true when referring to two-position counterweight propellers? Blade angle changes are accomplished by the use of two forces, one hydraulic and the other centrifugal. Counterweights, flyweights, take the blades toward the high pitch and oil pressure moves the blades to low pitch. The oil force is controlled by the governor. Most engine propeller combinations have one or more critical ranges within which continuous operation is permitted. Critical ranges are established to avoid severe propeller vibration. These are vibration ranges that cannot be operated in. It is permissible to pass through the range, but continued operation is prohibited. Which of the following defects is cause for rejection of wood propellers? An oversized hub or bolt hole or elongated bolt holes. A wooden propeller that has oversized hub or bolt holes or elongated holes must be rejected. An aircraft's propeller system beta range is used to produce zero or negative thrust. The beta range is generally considered ground operation, which includes taxi or landing ground roll. During the beta range, during landing, the propeller provides negative thrust. The primary purpose of a cuff on a propeller is to increase the flow of cooling air to the engine nacelle. A cuff is a non-structural fairing that provides smooth flow of the intake air into the engine. The purpose of a three-way propeller valve is to direct oil from the engine oil system to the propeller cylinder. A three-way propeller valve is used to direct flow from the engine to the propeller or allow oil to be dumped from the propeller cylinder. The primary purpose of a propeller is to change engine horsepower to thrust. The primary purpose of the propeller system is to convert engine power into thrust. A constant speed propeller provides maximum efficiency by adjusting blade angle for the most conditions encountered in flight. By adjusting the blade angle in response to flight changes, the propeller can be used to its maximum efficiency. Propeller blade angle is the angle between the chord of the blade and the rotational plane of the propeller. Propeller blade angle is the angle between the chord of the blade and the plane of rotation. Constant speed, non-feathering Macaulay, Hartzell, and other propellers of similar design without counterweights increase pitch angle using oil pressure. These propellers use oil pressure to increase blade angle and centrifugal twisting force to decrease blade angle. What is indicated when the front cone bottoms while installing the propeller? Rear cone should be moved forward. If the front cone is bottoming on the front splines, then the propeller needs to be moved forward using the rear cone. Which of the following occurs to cause front cone bottoming during propeller installation? The front cone contacts the ends of the shaft splines, preventing the front and rear cones from being tightened against the cone seats and the propeller hub. The propeller is too far on the shaft. Generally, spacers can be placed behind the rear cone, moving the propeller forward on the shaft. This should give enough space to relocate the front cone away from the splines on the shaft. When running up an engine and testing a newly installed hydromatic propeller, it is necessary to exercise the propeller by moving the governor control through its entire travel several times to free the dome of any entrapped air. A new installation would not have oil in the propeller cylinder. By cycling the propeller through its operating range, the oil will fill the propeller cylinder and displace the air. What normally prevents a Hartzell compact propeller from going into feather when the engine is shut down on the ground? A latch mechanism composed of springs and lock pins. A latch mechanism prevents the propeller from feathering as it shows its rotation during shutdown. Centrifugal force keeps the latches from engaging during normal RPM ranges. Straightening of steel blades is a major repair which a powerplant mechanic cannot perform. A powerplant mechanic can remove small nicks, but dense and deep scars are beyond the scope of normal maintenance practices. What are the rotational speed and blade pitch angle requirements of a constant speed propeller during takeoff? High speed and low pitch angle. The propeller should be in low pitch so the engine can develop full power, high speed. A Cessna 180 aircraft has a Macaulay propeller model number 2A34C50-90A. This propeller is severely damaged in a ground accident, and this model propeller is not available for replacement. Which of the following should be used to find an approved alternate replacement? The aircraft specifications, type certificate data sheets. Aircraft type certificate data sheets will list all propellers acceptable to that aircraft. Which of the following contains a table that lists the engines to which a given propeller is adjustable? Propeller type certificate data sheets. The propeller type certificate data sheets list all engines the given propeller may be used on. What unit in the propeller anti-icing system controls the output of the pump? Rheostat. Fluid is pumped to the propeller by use of electric motor. This motor is normally controlled by a rheostat in the control system. When lubricating a Hartzell propeller blade with grease to prevent damage to the blade seals, the service manual may recommend on some models to remove one of the two Zerk fittings for the blade and grease the blade through the remaining fitting. To prevent damaging blade seals on some propellers, the manufacturer's instructions may have the technician remove one grease fitting and pump grease through the other fitting until fresh grease comes out the removed fitting hole. This pushes any moisture and old grease out of the hub. How is anti-icing fluid ejected from the slinger ring on a propeller? By centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is used to eject anti-icing fluid through the slinger ring onto the propeller. Propeller fluid anti-icing systems generally use which of the following? Isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol is normally used for anti-icing fluid on propellers. What is the function of the automatic propeller synchronizing system on multi-engine aircraft? To control engine RPM and reduce vibration. Multi-engine aircraft use automatic propeller synchronizing systems to hold the RPM of all engines the same to minimize vibration. Ice formation on propellers when an aircraft is in flight will decrease thrust and cause excessive vibration. The formation of ice on propeller blades will decrease thrust and cause propeller vibration due to an out-of-balance condition. Decreased thrust occurs because the ice alters the aerodynamic shape of the blades. Propeller operation of electric de-icing boots on individual propeller blades may best be determined by feeling the sequence of boot heating and have an assistant observe the load meter indications. Electric de-ice boots may be checked by feeling the boots on the propeller with your hand to determine if each one is heating, while an assistant monitors the ammeter for proper current flow as the boots cycle. What is the purpose of an arbor used in balancing a propeller? To support the propeller on the balance knives. During propeller balance, an arbor supports the propeller on the knife edges. Which of the following is used to correct horizontal unbalance of the wood propeller? Solder. A small amount of solder may be added to the metal tip of a wood propeller if horizontal unbalance is observed. Propeller aerodynamic thrust imbalance can be largely eliminated by correct blade contouring and angle setting. Aerodynamic thrust imbalance on propeller can be eliminated by correct blade contouring and angle setting. A power plant using a hydraulically controlled constant speed propeller is operating within the propeller's constant speed range at a fixed throttle setting. If the tension of the propeller governor control spring, speeder spring, is reduced by movement of the cockpit propeller control, the propeller blade angle will increase. Engine manifold pressure will increase, and engine RPM will decrease. If compression of the governor's speeder spring is reduced, the flyweights in the governor will produce an overspeed condition and cause the blade angle to increase. The increased blade angle will cause the RPM to decrease, which will cause an increase in the manifold pressure. Why is the pulley stop screw on a propeller governor adjustable? To limit the maximum engine speed during takeoff. On a manually adjustable constant speed governor, the pulley stop screw adjusts the maximum RPM. The governor allows the engine to produce. This screw limits the amount of speeder spring is allowed to compress. The propeller governor controls the oil to and from the pitch changing mechanism. In a hydraulically actuated propeller, the propeller governor controls the amount of oil flowing to and from the pitch change mechanism. What will happen to the propeller blade angle and the engine RPM if the tension of the propeller governor control speeder spring is increased? Blade angle will decrease and RPM will increase. If the compression of the governor's speeder spring is increased, the blade angle will decrease and the RPM will increase because the governor has sensed an underspeed condition. How is the speed of a constant speed propeller changed in flight? By changing the load tension against the flyweights in the governor. The speed of constant speed propeller is exchanged in flight by increasing or decreasing the tension on the speeder spring. The speeder spring changes tension load against the flyweights, indicating an overspeed or underspeed condition. When the centrifugal force acting on a propeller governor flyweights overcomes the tension of the speeder spring, a propeller is in what condition? Overspeed. If the flyweights overcome the tension of the speeder spring, the governor is in an overspeed condition. The governor will cause the propeller blade angle to increase to slow the propeller. What operational force causes the greatest stress on a propeller? Centrifugal force. The greatest force exerted on a propeller is centrifugal force. How is a propeller controlled in a large aircraft with a turboprop installation? By the engine power lever. On a turboprop aircraft, the engine governor and fuel controller are interconnected and work in coordination. As the pilot moves the power lever, asking for an increase or decrease in power, the fuel controller and governor establish the correct combination of RPM, fuel flow, and propeller blade angle for the power desired. How does the aerodynamic twisting force affect operating propeller blades? It tends to turn the blades to a high blade angle. Aerodynamic twisting force tends to turn the propeller blades to their high pitch angle. Propellers exposed to salt spray should be flushed with fresh water. Propellers exposed to salt water should be washed down with fresh water as soon as possible after the exposure. The parts should be thoroughly dried and a light coating of oil should be applied to the metal parts. How can a steel propeller hub be tested for cracks? By magnetic particle inspection. Steel propeller hubs are inspected for cracks by non-destructive testing, NDT, using the magnetic particle inspection, MPI, method. During which of the following conditions of flight will the blade pitch angle of a constant speed propeller be the greatest? High speed, high altitude cruising flight. Of the conditions listed, the propeller's blade pitch angles are highest for high speed, high altitude cruising flight. The actual distance a propeller moves forward through the air during one revolution is known as effective pitch. The distance a propeller moves through the air on one revolution is known as its effective pitch. The pitch-changing mechanism of a hydromatic propeller is lubricated by the pitch-changing oil. Hydromatic propellers are filled with engine oil. This provides lubrication for all pitch-changing parts. The centrifugal twisting moment of an operating propeller tends to reduce the pitch angle. The centrifugal twisting moment, CTM, action on a propeller blade tends to push the blades to a low pitch. The holding coil on a hydromatic propeller feathering button switch holds a solenoid relay closed that applies power to the propeller feathering pump motor. The holding coil of a hydromatic propeller holds the feathering button in a depressed position and keeps the feathering pump on until the propeller reaches full feather. Oil pressure will then build up until it opens the oil pressure switch in the governor. Blade angle is an angle formed by a line perpendicular to the crankshaft and a line formed by the chord of the blade. The acute angle between the chord of the blade and the plane of rotation, which is perpendicular to the crankshaft, is known as the propeller blade angle. A propeller blade station number increases from hub to tip. The aerodynamic force acting in a rotating propeller blade operating at a normal pitch angle tends to increase the pitch angle. The aerodynamic force acting on a rotating propeller blade operating at normal pitch angle tends to increase the angle of pitch on the blades. The blade angle of a fixed pitch propeller is smallest at the tip. The centrifugal twisting force acting on a propeller blade is greater than the aerodynamic twisting force and tends to move the blade to a lower angle. The centrifugal twisting force acting on a propeller is greater than the aerodynamic twisting force and tends to move the blade to a lower blade angle. Geometric pitch of a propeller is defined as the effective pitch plus slippage. Geometric pitch of a propeller is the sum of the effective pitch and slippage. It is also the distance the propeller would move in one revolution through a solid. What operational force tends to bend the propeller blade forward to the tip? Thrust bending force. The operational force that tends to bend the propeller blades forward at the tip is known as thrust bending force. During takeoff, propeller thrust, pull, is greatest if the blade angle of attack is low and the engine power setting is high. True. The primary purpose of a feathering propeller is to eliminate the drag created by the windmilling propeller when an engine fails in flight. The primary purpose of feathering a propeller is to eliminate the drag caused by a windmilling propeller during flight if the engine should fail. One of the advantages of inspecting an aluminum propeller utilizing dye penetrant inspection procedure is that It shows whether visible lines and other marks are actually cracks rather than scratches. The NDT method of dye-penetrant inspection will indicate if marks are scratches or cracks. What type of blade angle change will occur on a constant speed propeller during a constant powered dive? The blade angle will increase to overcome overspeeding to the limits of the propeller. What process is used to determine the position of propeller blades relative to each other? The blades are tracked through their rotation either statically or dynamically to determine the tip path. What should be used to clean aluminum propeller blades and hubs? The propeller should be cleaned in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. No harsh abrasives or steel wool, no caustic chemical cleaners that might damage seals or anti-ice boots, nothing that would leave a corrosive residue on the blades should be used. What will cause a constant speed feathering propeller to go to the feathered position? A loss of oil pressure in the governor and or the engine, or placement of the cockpit control into the feather position. How can a feathering propeller be unfeathered? What is the purpose of an oil accumulator connected to the propeller governor? Restoring the oil pressure to the propeller and or governor by motoring and starting the engine or allowing oil pressure from an unfeathering accumulator to enter the prop. What is the purpose of a magnetic pickups on some propeller synchronization units? The magnetic pickups count the propeller revolutions and send a signal to the synchronizer until which changes the RPM to match the master propeller.